Baby, wouldn't it be nice if we both spoke the same language? I could understand your troubles and you know mine, and we could be together all the time if we both spoke the same language. Baby, no sería lindo si nos dos habláramos la misma lengua. Podría entender tus problemas y sabrías los míos.
Hello and welcome again to Whoever You Thought You Were, You're a Jew. This is our 13th episode, and in fact this is the last time the program is going to be on. Frankly, I don't think I've got the energy to do another 13 weeks. Today's show is called The New World Order. Actually, I think it's reasonable to say that the purpose of doing this show in the first place, and for doing the book on which the show is based, is because several years ago I read about a so-called New World Order, which is a new world order of banking dictatorship, which we discussed earlier in this series. Many of you knew about it before, and hopefully those of you who didn't have given it some thought, because truly the world is on the verge of going in a very bad direction. And I felt that it might not be a bad idea to propose a new world order of a different nature, instead of the one that's heading toward us like a railroad train out of control, based on this guy, our friend the Golden Calf here. I'm going to propose a new world order based on this. In fact, based on a concept even, if anything, somewhat broader than this. A new world order under God, based on traditional religions, but only those religions that we can be certain came from God. So today, to close this series, I'm going to propose my new world order. And I have to tell you that this is a very unpopular idea. It'll be interesting to see whether this idea gets any response. I found no support for this idea from any organized religion, or from any atheist groups, or from friends, from loved ones, from family. So far, it looks like I'm all alone on this one, and yet I'm so certain that the idea is correct that I've gone to the trouble of doing a 13-week TV series. Now I'm going to review a little bit of what we've discussed before. I began the series by talking a little bit about Oriental religion, specifically towards the end of showing how the Oriental religions were related to Judaism. Let's take a look at our diagram from back then. This is the timeline we looked at about 12 weeks ago, I guess. There's a horizontal aspect running from 1800 BC to 600 AD, and on the horizontal line we have Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. However, vertically, at 600 BC, we have this large collection of Oriental religions. This collection is the entire collection, for all intents and purposes, of Oriental religions that are practiced in the world today. And what I want you to notice, as I pointed out earlier, is that they all arose in the same century. The main thing that we tried to show 12 weeks ago was that the mathematics of this are absolutely astronomical. That is, the chances of all these 6 Oriental religions all popping up in the same century are astronomically small. It cannot have been a coincidence. And since, as we showed, the only possible explanation was the diaspora, or forced exile of hundreds of thousands of Jews from the northern and southern kingdoms of Israel at the hands of Assyrian and Babylonian invaders. That diaspora is the only possible explanation. We showed that Jews are known to have gone to all these places. In fact, many of the so-called lost tribes are in these places. Now, exactly how Judaism gave rise to Buddhism or Taoism or Confucianism, I don't know, and I don't think it'll ever be known. I never suggested that any of the founders of these religions were Jews either openly or in secret, or that they took lessons from Jews. That's not how it happened. All I know is that to my satisfaction it's entirely established that it was the will of God, that is the God of Abraham, that these 6 religions would rise up, and the manner in which God brought this about was related to the Jewish diaspora. Consequently, in our New World Order, our new New World Order, we're going to be working with the fact that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam have a definite relationship, and that the 3 of them together bear a definite relationship to these Oriental religions running vertically. Now, some of the other things we talked about were, for example, we discussed the fact that Jews are not really an ethnic group, and we tried to come up with a better definition for what a Jew is. If you were watching that show, you may remember that we concluded that Jews may be more closely related to Attila the Hun than King Solomon. So what is a Jew? Well, that's one of the things we're trying to determine. We also realized that the lost tribes of Israel, as I have already said today, were not really lost. In fact, there were records of Jews traveling to every part of the known world, Africa, Asia, all the way over to the Far East, maybe even to the Americas. Furthermore, the line of David, through intermarriage in all these countries, has grown so large that when we did a genetic and a mathematical analysis of the descendants of David, it was very easy to come to the conclusion that it may very well be the case that there aren't many people in the world today who are not descendants of David. And what that means is that the Messiah, who's prophesied to spring from the line of David, really could come from just about any place. He could be an Oriental, he could be an African, he could be anyone. And not only does it mean that the Messiah could spring from any place, it also means that the Messiah is for everybody. These are important conclusions. Now I want to talk about this New World Order. The world is eventually, and in fact the world in the very near future, is going to really be one world. And the one world that's shaping up right now is not a very good world, and we want a better one. So in order to develop an idea for a better one, I turned to Socrates. And the reason I turned to Socrates is because Socrates' treatise on government, which was recorded by Plato in the work called The Republic, this is a work that's been read in schools in every country in the Western world for as long as history has been kept, all the way back to the days of Socrates himself. That's 2,500 years, or the better part of it. Every country, every continent, in every age, every century, people have been reading that work, and it's perfectly obvious that people understand on a very fundamental and deep level that Socrates really had something important to say about government. Now, the exact details of the Socratic perfect government needn't concern us now. The important thing is that the disciples of Socrates asked him who was going to manage this whole thing, because they realized that the government he was proposing required some very capable and wise people to rule over it. And it eventually emerged that what Socrates actually had in mind was what he called an aristocracy of the best. Now, that word aristocracy may sound frightening, but remember, aristocracy of the best. And the best to Socrates meant the most compassionate, the least selfish. An aristocracy of the best would be fine, but how do you keep them best? Also, consider this. Who would you like to have ruling over you? You want to have a military government? I don't think so. Does anybody out there really want to be ruled over by Rockefeller or by a World Bank, which is only interested in getting more money for itself and less money for you? I don't think so. How about secular university professors? Do you think that'll work? You have to admit that what goes on at universities can be pretty crazy. I mean, there may very well be university presidents or professors who would be good rulers. But how could you control that? Because there are just as many university professors who go absolutely wild. The university professors in Nazi Germany all collaborated with Hitler. So I don't think the answer is to be found in universities. Nor is it going to be found in criminal judges from our court system. I don't know how many of you have had the misfortune of being dragged through an American court, but not too many people who have come back bringing a good report. And an ordinary civil type of judge is not the kind of person I want ruling the world. So Socrates, that is, talked about an aristocracy of the best, and who is the best? From his point of view, the best was the philosophers. In other words, it was him. And since people have been studying Socrates for 2,500 years, I think that most people would very well consider, at least, trusting a man like Socrates or somebody of that stature, somebody of that wisdom. But that reduces to the question of where are the philosophers today? And my answer to that question is as follows. It's perfectly clear to me that the Lord God created the Jewish religion in its original form, which was quite different from what is practiced today. But that original form of Judaism gave rise to modern Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And I don't think anybody's going to dispute that. So whoever else our philosophers are going to be, they're certainly going to involve elements of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, if I have anything to say about it. So who else is it going to include? And the answer is, from my point of view, it's going to include all of those Oriental religions that arose in response to the Jewish diaspora, because the historical and mathematical considerations of that period show beyond a doubt that that was the hand of God, if there is a God. And if it wasn't the hand of God, I challenge anyone out there to tell me whose hand it was that brings about a 1 out of 10 million chance. It simply doesn't happen in this world. So I would add to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam those Oriental religions that arose during that period, 600 BC, most of which are still practiced today. Let's take a look at that list. My idea for a world government is what I call a council of priests. And again, this is an idea that I have not found too much sympathy for, but I'm quite convinced it's a correct idea. And this council of priests would either replace our current United Nations, which most people who studied it know is really a disguised banking organization. It's not really a human rights group at all. So this council of priests would either totally replace the corrupt United Nations or at the very least have absolute power over it. And this council of priests would consist of these 9 members. These are our 9 religions. This time I've got them listed historically in the order in which they arose. Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Taoism, Confucianism, Jainism, Christianity, and Islam. This is a non-democratic proposal that these 9 religions each have representatives who meet, discuss the issues, and vote, and anything that's not acceptable to all 9 cannot be done. Now it may be that will slow things down somewhat, but where the hell are we going in such a hurry anyway? The rationale behind including these 9 is simply that these are the 9 religions of God as I perceive it. Any other religions in the world which you would perceive to be religions of God can best be viewed as being a subsidiary of one of these. But each of these 9 religions is completely distinct, and they each have different contributions. Judaism was the first religion to recognize one God. The Hindu religion, it's a link between East and West. Very few people outside of India are going to subscribe to Hindu mythology, but the Hindus have shown the world that it's possible to understand God and enlightenment to be related things, and not 2 different concepts which must be at war. Furthermore, in the Hindu religion, we find that the idea that God can appear as a man, but not be seen by everyone who sees him as being God, well, that's a very important thing in trying to understand how Christianity and Islam can be reconciled. Anyway, Hinduism has been a very important force in the world for synthesizing seemingly irreconcilable ideas. Now, if we skip down to number 7, Jainism is a religion which is based on extreme asceticism. And Mahavira, its founder, sort of represents a borderline that one can attain salvation by absolute renunciation of the world. But not everybody has to absolutely renounce the world. Buddha attained enlightenment and he didn't renounce the whole world. He took what he called a middle path. Now, Zoroastrianism is hated by Christians and Muslims because the Zoroastrians teach that evil is a force which is equal in power to God. And the Zoroastrians teach that good and evil will be at war forever till the end of time, whereas most Christians are quite convinced that evil will be permanently destroyed. Although the Bible doesn't exactly say that, but it certainly doesn't equate good and evil. However, the effect of Zoroastrianism, which teaches that evil will never disappear and must be battled forever, cannot be said to be a bad thing. It will do us no harm to consider the possibility that we might have to fight pretty hard against evil, harder than we're fighting. Taoism teaches about how one can accomplish without doing, something which would be very valuable in today's hectic world. Confucius, historically, is the father of the Golden Rule. Some Jews think he got it from the Torah, but Confucius published it first, and everyone else followed. It's the rule which all human behavior ought to be based on. And then, of course, is Christianity and Islam. If these aren't the philosophers, then who are? And if these people can't rule over the world, then who can? This idea that I'm fixated on, that the different religions are going to work together someday, not necessarily to merge, but to cooperate, it's based on the Bible, the book of Micha, or Micah in English, chapter 4, and it says, "In the last days it shall come to pass, that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow unto it." Last days, of course, is what Jews and Christians call the Messianic era. Muslims say that's the days of the coming of the Mahdi, and the Buddhists would say that's the days when Buddha will return. Everybody has a different idea of exactly what it means, but there's a general agreement that it means the time when the world will become perfected. Now, what people shall flow unto it? Micah continues, "And many nations shall come and say, Come, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, and to the house of the God of Jacob. And he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth out of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." Now this phrase, many nations, I've got underlined here. Many nations will come to the mountain of the Lord. Not just Jews, and not just Christians. Whenever the Bible says many nations, that means everybody. And finally the verse concludes as follows, "For all the people will walk, everyone in the name of his God, and we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever." What does that mean, everyone will walk in the name of his God? Isn't that saying that in the end times all the religions will serve the Lord in Jerusalem without actually giving themselves up? That every religion will survive intact, and people will walk in the name of their God, of his God, but they will be walking in Jerusalem on the Mount of the Lord. I thought this verse was so important that I turned it into a little song, which I played a few weeks ago. I'll play it for you again. There's our verse on the screen. "For everyone will walk in the name of his God, and we will walk in the name of the Lord our God, forever and ever." For everyone will walk in the name of his God, and we will walk in the name of the Lord our God, forever and ever. Now, as to the definition of what exactly is a Jew, we found that there's really only one satisfactory definition, at least from my point of view, and it comes from the book of Matthew, and it's the words of Jesus, "Whosoever shall do the will of my Father which is in heaven." the same is my brother and sister and mother. And for those of you who are not comfortable with Christianity, I rewrote that below. Whosoever shall do the will of our Father which is in heaven, the same is a Jew. If obedience to God isn't what Judaism is, then there's no such religion. And this verse is so important that I wrote a little song about this one also.
Everybody who does the will of my Father, who art in heaven, the same is my brother, my sister, my mother, my brother, my sister, and my mother. My brother, my sister, my mother, my brother, my sister, and my mother. And Jesus was talking to the people, and his mother and brothers showed up and wanted to see him. And one of his followers said to him, "Yo, Master, your mother and your brothers are here. They're standing outside, and they'd like to have a word with you." But he answered and said to the guy that spoke, "Who is my mother? And where is my brother and my sister?" And he stretched forth his hand to his disciples, and he said, "Behold, behold, behold my brother, my sister, my brother and my sister. My brother, my sister, my brother and my sister." Everybody who does the will of my Father, who art in heaven, the same is my brother, my sister, my mother, my brother, my sister, and my mother. My brother, my sister, my mother, my brother, my sister, and my mother.
And there it is. Whosoever shall do the will of my Father which art in heaven, the same is my brother, my mother, and my sister. And bear in mind also that the Bible says that people of all nations and all religions will continue to practice their ways, but they're all going to converge on the Mount of the Lord, and that's in Jerusalem. That's about all that can be said about the new world order, at least right now. And that's about all that can be said on whoever you thought you were, you're a Jew, because the series is now over. I hope that people have learned something from this. I know that in the research that led to it, I learned a lot. And I thought that what I learned was important and that it should be told to other people. I've done some writing on these subjects, and I've brought the writings to Jewish synagogues where they were not well received, which didn't surprise me. I also brought them to major Christian centers, publishers, churches, famous people, and they weren't received well there either. As for the Muslims, they didn't even return my calls. I went to Buddhist organizations, and they were interested at first, but the reaction at all the religious organizations was really the same. That is, each religious organization was really thrilled to see a Jew taking such a deep interest in their beliefs. But their excitement waned quite a bit when they realized that I wasn't going to convert to their ways, but that I wanted the common truths of all religions to be emphasized and acknowledged. And the religious organizations apparently are not going to do that. And of course the secular organizations are not interested in religion in the first place. So basically the kinds of subjects that we've been talking about in Whoever You Thought You Were, You're a Jew, are subjects which have no place of rest as of yet. And that worries me, because I feel that there's not very much time left. Well, I suppose I shouldn't worry about it too much. If the Messiah does not come, which, by the way, is scheduled for September of this year, if the Messiah doesn't come, I have a feeling that there's going to be approximately 100,000 years of suffering ahead. And that number comes from the fact that the Jews wandered 40 years in the desert, And when they didn't shape up, they went into diaspora for 2,000 years, which is 50 times as long as the original 40. So if the world doesn't shape up now and you multiply by 50 again, you get 100,000 years. And I hope it doesn't come to that. So for my part, I try to teach what I know. I don't know everything, but what I know I've taught. And I hope that people have enjoyed listening. And I certainly appreciate the many wonderful calls I got from viewers. So I'm glad I did the show, and it was exhausting, but it's over now, and we have to go on to the next stage. So, I'm Dr. Beagleisen, and this is Whoever You Thought You Were, You're a Jew. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that we can get together again sometime. Thank you, and goodbye.
Focus on the one thing that I'm sure of. Baby, wouldn't it be nice if we both spoke the same language? I could understand your troubles and you know mine, and we could be together all the time if we both spoke the same language. If we both spoke the same language. If we both spoke the same